I mean, those are the kind of things. And I'm thinking about one small location in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I'm like, man, anybody could have had that. Anybody. But if it's not in the mindset, people miss those opportunities. And so anyhow, not to get so sidetracked, but it's just those are the kind of things when you start locking on to what needs to be done are big. So here's the professional thing I want to make sure is clear. We talk about overcoming the fear of the unknown by making the unknown known, okay? But in order to do that, leaders, this is so practical, but it's huge because it almost gives you a little, almost like a filter system to use. Passion is great, but passion wanes. Clarity wins, always, okay? And I said it once before, but no matter how talented a football team is, they can have the best players, best athletes in the world. If the quarterback walks in the huddle and says, just get open, that's a problem. I don't care how talented the ball players are. I have never seen a highly effective, confused ball player ever. Your confusion diminishes effectiveness. It's just how it works. So many times, leaders, as we're leading our people, especially in the basics, clarity is king. And there's a tendency as leaders sometimes, is because I said it really loud or said it really often, it must mean it was clear. No, you just said it really loud and you just said it really often. What you say is never as important as what the other person understands. And when they don't do it, we believe either it's a communication gap or a lack of effort or they don't really want it. Before you ever go there, start asking this question. Do we have clarity? Are we aligned around clarity? So this is what clarity is. I learned this from General Robles, who was the CEO of USAA Insurance, when I was doing a ton of work with him. It's stuck with me ever since. So clarity is simply this. One is being clear about what we want. So clarity is knowing what it is we want. Number two, it is why we want it. Okay? Number one is what. Number two is why. Number three is how we're going to do it. In parentheses, please put the word flexible. Number four is benefits. And number five is cost of inaction. Number one is what? Number two is why. Number three is how. In parentheses, flexible. Number four is the benefits. Number five is cost of inaction. Now I know we got some military in this room. And this is simply called commander's intent. And the commander is very clear about what he wants to do. And he considers commander's intent knowing what it is. When I heard that from General Robles, I said, General, can you break this down? He said, very simple. We have to be crystal clear on what it is we want. So what is it that we want? He goes, never take that for granted. Most leaders spend time telling people what they don't want, not what they do. I was like, whoa. He was like, all the time. If you actually listen to how we talk to the people that we lead, we spend far more time coaching them backwards instead of forwards. We tell them what we don't want, not necessarily what we do want. We spend a lot of time in that. I was like, okay, so we get clear. He says, yes. So Eric, here's what I'm telling you. Guys, we need to win that hill. This is how he gave me it. He said, we need to win that hill. I was like, okay, great. He was like, but Eric, now what I don't do is then tell them this is how we're going to win that hill. Is what most people do. He goes, so what I need leaders to do is this is what we're going to do, win that hill, and here's why we're going to win that hill. Because if we don't win that hill, this would expose to our God. There's going to be tons of sacrifice, tons of loss. He goes, that is the part that we got to really get people to understand. Because if they don't understand the why, if you skip the why is the emotion, the why is the strategic part. The why increases intelligence. The why allows us to bounce back and forth and really wrap our minds around what this change is all about, what we're trying to do. Almost everybody skips that, especially especially in retail, especially in operations. Why? Because we don't have time to go through that. But as my grandma used to say, either you're going to take the time to do it right or you're going to take the time to do it again. And we find ourselves doing the same thing over and over again when many times the clarity of the why is what's missing. I said, okay, I got it. Clarity of what? Clarity of why. Talking about it. He said, I didn't say it's easy because sometimes you're going to have all kinds of conversations bouncing back and forth and you're like, can we just get on with it? No, because most of the leaders who make the decision spend a lot more time talking about it than the ones who have to go implement it. And guess what? We're all adults. And what's the one thing your child, when you were raising them, when they were young, used to drive you crazy when they would ask you all the time? Why? Do you think that left your head just because you're now an adult? No, it's always there. And so instead of fighting it, engage in it. Now follow this here. Now it comes to the how. And I said, General Robles, why do you insist of being flexible? His best answer ever. He says, well, yeah, the enemy gets a vote. He goes, no matter how good your game plan is, the enemy gets a vote. It's a variable in the equation. No matter how good our strategy is, guess what? The marketplace gets a vote. Our competitors gets a vote. The pandemic gets a vote. All kinds of things get a vote. Now, we're not changing what we're doing. We're not changing why we're doing it. But if we are not flexible on the how, we'll never get there. And we got to have a learning mindset that we have to be flexible on the how. We can spend plenty of time getting, this is exactly how we're going to execute, only to discover that that does not work. And if you cannot change direction fast, already in trouble. Already in trouble. In football, we used to say, at some point, you're going to have to be an athlete, man. I know we wrote it down, and they were supposed to do this. I mean, I had a coach, I'll never forget, I had a coach tell me one day, he was like, Eric, this is the route. You got to get here. I was like, I got you, but Deion Sanders is covering me. Brother, he's a variable in the equation. Okay. Man, just tell the quarterback, go to the other side. Man, I got nothing, right? But the point is, it's the adjustment of it. And then we talk about the benefits, which was 4. So we're all clear about it. But here's the piece, and this is really, really important. Okay? Number 5, when I said the cost of inaction, when it comes to clarity. Leaders, we are not helping anybody. Not helping our people, when we eliminate the consequences, if we don't do it right. We gotta have the conversation. We gotta be willing to talk about it. If this doesn't work, what's gonna happen? If the standards don't come up, what's gonna happen? If this doesn't end, what's gonna happen? That's just real conversations. Who was the gentleman who spoke today? I just loved it. Oh, it was so awesome. Who was talking about the supply chain challenges. I guess he's never told a joke before. Dennis was awesome, right? But I know, I'm looking at him, he's like, I'm not trying to make, anybody sad. But I will tell you, a positive attitude is not a denial of reality. A positive attitude is, I can look reality in his face and we know together we will find a way. That's a positive attitude. I always say that. Hope by itself ain't a strategy, y'all. But hope should be invested into a strategy, right? And we do that collectively together. But the cost of inaction has to be articulated. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be felt. If we do this, this is what happens. If this doesn't change, this is what happens. Welcome to growing up. My auntie used to say this, but I've heard other people say it so well. They used to say, hey, look, I'm responsible to you, but I ain't responsible for you. You grown. Now, I care about you. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to give you all the information. I'm making it clear about what we need to do. But there is always a cost. If we don't do it, to all of us. And sometimes I think we try to remove a consequence from the equation, or we use vague terms in the consequence. Like we talk about all the benefits, but when the consequence, but if this don't happen, we're going to have to revisit this. What does that mean? Just say, well, if we got to revisit this, there's the real problem. Here's the problem. Here's what's going to happen if we don't. Now I got clarity, right? Until then, I don't have clarity. And so make sure your people are getting, I'm not talking about scaring them to death, but we can be so on the optimistic side that we don't get an accurate description that what we're going through is tough. But we're built to do tough things. We're made for it. Everybody in this room has done hard things. That's why you're here. You're not in this role if you haven't done hard things. And if we can do it, but we did it before, we can do it again, especially together. Okay? All right. Last one. Go right here. Fear. Okay. Fear of failure. So we overcome fear of the unknown by making the unknown known. We do it with personal goals. More importantly, we do it with a good clarity of a plan when we work with teams, groups like that, all right, as we're leading. But fear of failure is another thing that can really get in the way of us being at our best. So here's my question. By show of hands, how many people in this room talk to themselves? Raise your hand if you talk to yourself. Okay, all right, cool. I saw some people not raise their hand. And I'm always amazed when people don't raise their hand because I'm sitting there thinking, how in the world did they answer the question? Nope, I don't talk to myself. I can see why other people do, but I don't. Now, I have a little fun, but we always talk to ourselves. We all talk to ourselves. We talk to ourselves. But here's the challenge. When we talk about the fear of failure, many of us talk to ourselves, but the real problem is so many of us, unfortunately, listen to ourselves far too much. So instead of listening to yourself, I'm going to really challenge you to start telling yourself exactly what you want to see. Now, follow me when I say this. Fear of failure is a self-image issue. My self-image has everything to do with how I see myself. How I see, this is personal now, how I see myself, right? And how I see myself influences my behavior, influences how I show up, and influences how I do all kinds of things. And what happens a lot of times, when people fear failure, they try to overcome their fear of failure by just becoming more competent. So I'm going to spend all my time working on my competence. I got to learn more. I got to get better at my skills. I got to get at all those things. Now, I'm not diminishing all that. I'm only saying that skill enhancement, competency enhancement adds to some of your success. But if you can learn to multiply your confidence and build your confidence, it will multiply your success. It has a compound effect. Do you really think field goal kickers don't know how to kick? Whoever watched this weekend in football? Okay. Do you really think a guy shooting at the free throw line who's literally, the distance hasn't changed. He's made 1 million of those. And all of a sudden, he hits the front edge and it almost doesn't even get there? Have you ever sat in a meeting and you know all the things you thought about and all of that, you know that what you're hearing doesn't make sense. You know you should speak up. You know you should say something. You know you have a better idea. But instead of sharing it, you go, oh, what are you talking about? Just be quiet. Just hold it to yourself. You just start almost diminishing your own competence. I've always said all the time, man, you know, it's funny how a little bit of confidence with a whole lot of confidence, man, that person's going to get a lot done. I didn't say a whole lot of ego. I didn't say that. I said a whole lot of confidence. Because a highly confident individual can acknowledge where their competency levels may exist and be humble and hungry enough to keep learning. They got a resiliency. They got a bounce back. They step outside of their comfort zones. Now, here's what I do know. To go where you all want to go and where you're headed, especially listening to your leader, especially listening to John, right? I love James. Let's go. Well, clearly, where you're going to go, you might have to do things you haven't done before. And so if you fear failure, if you attach your identity to whether you succeed or not, that literally puts so much pressure on you. It's crazy. So I remind leaders, especially right now, it's fear. Hear me well. It's fear of failure. It's not failure that's the problem. It's the fear of failure that's the problem. So we have to redefine how we look at failure. So instead of trying to be a better BD, instead of trying to be a better SMO, instead of trying to be a better leader with the people we work with, instead of trying, no. We train to be. We train. And everybody knows when you make up your mind that it's training, you know the only way I get better is with trial and error. I'm going to do this. It might not work. I course correct. There we go. Versus spending all my time making sure I'm doing it perfectly in the first place. Man, can you imagine those of us who have children, who have made grandchildren when they're little? Man, what's so amazing is, and I thought this was fascinating. Little kids, I mean, they never sit there and think about, oh man, I can't fall again. No, they just get up and fall, get up, fall, get up, fall, get up, fall, and then they finally start running. They discover the success pattern, and guess what they do with all the falling? They just forget about it. They treat it like scaffolding. I built up a success habit. Guess what? I throw away the rest. It's only as we get older that we carry all the mistakes with us. Like, man, instead of learning from the past, we're trying to reframe it. I thought it was interesting. They showed an interview that they said for little kids, by the time they are about 3 years old, they've almost evaluated almost 97, 98% of all little kids are considered highly creative. By age 5, it goes down to something like 60%. By age 8, it goes down to 30%. And if you actually believe the creativity left the building, no. I was trying to figure out what in the world happened to these poor little kids during that time. Like, what was the stress level, right? Where did all the creativity and freedom go? It went from being surrounded by other people who fear failure, and fear of failure is contagious. It's how it works. And so leaders, man, during this period of time, we're gonna ask our people to do some things, try some new things, but we gotta be willing to go first. We gotta be willing to do the same thing. But I will say what's gonna help even more is when you actually use your failures to get better. So here's my only question to you. Question for you. I want you guys to be willing to share it with each other. I want you to share a failure that you had, but you learned a ton from it. Like one of your failures that you had, and you gained so much from that experience, right? I don't want to hear about your successes. I don't want to hear about, I always say it this way. When leaders are in positions like you are, it's like, I remember being at the YMCA one day, this isn't the actual case, but I just imagine being at the Y, me shooting baskets, Michael Jordan walks in, okay? I shoot a shot at the end of the game and I miss. And Michael Jordan comes up to me and says, hey man, against Utah, bro, I hit that winning three-pointer, Dude, I watched the game. I got the hat, the shirt, everything. I mean, as cool as that is, you don't got to tell me about your successes because you're Michael Jordan. I know that already. What really helped is when instead he turns around and says, man, I've missed so many game winners. I'm just proud of you for taking it. Brother, let me tell you the time. Look at the difference of that. Look at the experience of that. And I ask leaders all the time, you are walking around with all kinds of failures that you've survived. You survived every one of them or you wouldn't be in the position you're in. And you got a team full of people who just are so nervous to make a mistake. Man, you've made a mistake and lived after it. Let them know, right? Tell them that there's life out of a mistake. Actually tell them you ain't making them fast enough. Bounce back quicker. So I just want you to take a second with the PLU. What's a failure? What's a failure you've had that you've learned a ton from, that you've gained so much from? And then I bring you back after that. So this definitely requires a leadoff hit. So go ahead and do that at this time.